Good morning, friends, and welcome to the Biblical Perspective for Saturday, March the 20th, 2021, coming to you from Winsboro, South Carolina, with some news you can use and framing it in a biblical perspective. I don't often just give all of my time to one or two other authors, but today I just have been so impacted by two very special writers. I want to share what their views are to you first. For the first one is one you've probably not heard me even refer to before, and that's Roger Kimball, the editor and publisher of the New Criterion and publisher of Encounter Books. He had a great article in the Epoch Times about, well, here's the title of the article. For the United States, gradual ruin is about to become sudden. And then I want to give you a response by great Christian pastor Greg Laurie, who's a tremendous friend to all evangelical Christianity and a leader in our ranks. And to hear what he has to say about what God is doing in these days. And I'll have my own comments as well. As we get there, I want to say that starting his article, Roger Kimball used an example that came from a conversation in Ernest Hemingway's book, The Sun Also Rises, where two of the characters are talking about bankruptcy, and one asks the other, "How did you go bankrupt?" Two ways, Mike said, gradually and then suddenly. Yes, gradually. And for many folks, they understood this last year when gradually things looked kind of bad at the beginning of last year. And then all of a sudden, here comes this explosion of COVID 19, the panic, the government shutdowns. And all of a sudden, those who were a little bit on the edge found themselves staring bankruptcy in the face. It happened gradually, then suddenly. What's been happening in our country may have appeared to be gradual last year, but it's coming to a head with some things that have been happening all around us that a lot of people seem to be oblivious to, but yet it's bringing us to the edge of that cliff. Now, Roger Kimball talks about this by saying, "Hey, I thought of that quote that we mentioned earlier, that gradually, then suddenly, when I learned that Dr. Seuss Enterprises had decided to stop selling six books by the famous children's author because, according to the bureaucrats at the concession, they depict various ethnic groups in ways that are hurtful and wrong. I thought of it again last week when Disney decided that some of its most popular shows didn't pass muster with the woke wardens of political correctness, and they restricted access to Dumbo, Peter Pan, Aristocrats, some other children's classics because they were too racially insensitive. Closer to home, Amazon, the self described world's largest bookstore, joined the censors by delisting a book I published a few years ago at Encounter, the one entitled When Harry Became Sally, responding to the transgender moment by Ryan T. Anderson. While the book is a thoughtful and scholarly analysis of the psychological costs of treating gender dysphoria with drugs and surgery, Amazon suddenly and without any explanation dropped the book because they said they no longer, quote, sell books that frame LGBTQ plus identity as a mental illness, end quote. Now, Anderson's book does no such thing, but no matter. Amazon is in this respect like the Lord. Man proposeth, Amazon disposeth. These little cultural markers, and there are plenty more where they came from, suggested to me that we were about at an end of the gradual phase of cultural decay, and we were about to embark on the sudden part of the journey. Then there's the more serious stuff, the nearly $2 trillion so called COVID relief package that all but guarantees a spike in inflation but shovels much, much more money to teachers' unions, favored racial groups, and then to people who have actually suffered from the government lockdowns during the CCP virus pandemic. And then there's the passage in the House of H.R. 1, which I talked to you about last week, the so called For the People bill, which would effectively assure that there will never be another fair election in this country. It would do this by all but obliterating voter ID requirements. You need an ID to board a plane, but not to cast a vote. Mandating same day voter registration, at least 2 weeks of early voting, and by requiring states to provide unsupervised drop boxes to receive completed ballots. In other words, H.R. 1 would centralize presidential elections, taking responsibility for oversight away from the states, where the Constitution placed it, and arrogating it to the clutches of the federal government and its sprawling bureaucracy. If, as it seems almost certain, H.R. 1 becomes the law of the land, it would be the final nail in the coffin of electoral integrity. Folks, do not forget that quote. I think it's quite accurate as to where we're headed. The widespread irregularities that attended the 2020 election would be codified into law, assuring that for as long as anyone could envision, 2016 would have to be counted as the last free, fair, and open presidential election. It used to be that America was the land of the free and the home of the brave. A robust culture of free speech was every American's birthright. We had free and fair elections. Unlike the banana republics, we were always called upon to bail out or police. We also had borders, and even politicians eager to increase immigration understood the difference between entering the country legally and opening the floodgates to the hordes massing on our southern border. That's all behind us now, or at least those traditions appear to be on life support. No, the patient was on life support, but someone came to euthanize him and pulled the plug. The signs and portents, are many, and they are not encouraging. Perhaps the most disturbing episode last week was President Joe Biden's alarming performance when he announced the elevation of 2 women to the status of combat generals. Biden went on to underscore the intensity of purpose with which his administration would be pursuing, quote, body armor that fits women properly, tailoring combat uniforms for women, creating maternity flight suits, updating their hairstyle requirements, end quote. This wasn't from a Saturday Night Live skit. It was the President of the United States, live in front of the cameras. He went on to demonstrate that sad contingency when he strained unsuccessfully to even remember the name of the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, who was standing right there behind him, or the building where Austin worked, the Pentagon. I could go on and on from that particular section, but let me jump over. It says that Joe Biden, he has denominated his political opponents as domestic terrorists now, and directed the FBI to harass and arrest them. He has done everything in his considerable power to surrender the country to the woke mob. Meanwhile, the rest of the world isn't standing still. Look for a kinetic clash with Russia, China, or Iran soon. It's coming to a theater near you by the end of the summer. I do not mean a movie theater. Expect the velocity of our declivity to increase. The gauge is set to move from gradually to suddenly, and there will be plenty of shock and awe when it does. Is this alarmist? Maybe, but that is appropriate when the situation is alarming. Expect also to hear many people quoting the poet Delmore Schwartz, who said even paranoids have enemies. Folks, it's going to be a wild ride. Well, of course, it's going to be a wild ride. That's what Jesus told us would be happening in the end before he would return. It's going to get wilder, my friends, and there's no stopping it now. Remember what Jesus said in Matthew 24, when you begin to see these certain signals, he named many of them that we've been seeing ever since the clock turned over into 2000 almost. And when you start seeing these things, they're like birth pangs. He talked about that which would happen prophetically, that the 20th century laid out for us as we watched prophecy being fulfilled left and right. He likened his coming to a woman giving birth. When the birth pains start, sometimes there's false labor and then the pains increase. You're not going to stop the birth. It's coming. And Jesus is coming. You're not going to stop that. He's on his way. And we will see these birth pains intensify right up until the labor starts in such earnest that you know there's no stopping it until the baby comes. In this case, it's going to be until Jesus comes. When I turned to Pastor Greg Laurie, who wrote a similar article in the same edition, Greg's got a lot of hope for us as believers in Jesus Christ in these days. In fact, he talked about how It looked so dark and bleak around their church when COVID-19 had them shut down, but they turned to see what God was doing in these days and found that He was opening brand new doors for all of us to go through. Listen to what He says. I encourage people, turn your panic into prayer. Now, I love the way He does this. I want to focus on that for just a minute. Are you feeling a bit panicked, a little bit disturbed, a little bit concerned? You can say, I don't want to hear it. I just don't want to hear any more of the news. I'm going to go hide in my cave and pretend like this is not happening. That won't stop it, my friends. But I love what Laurie says here. Turn your panic into prayer. Listen as he goes on. Turn your worry into worship and look to God, who will give you the strength to get through what we're all going through together. With so many people spending so much time on their phones and tablets and screens in general, there's a whole new audience to reach, and people are coming back to God. We've all discovered the power of getting out there and just sharing the good news. For some of you who are watching on the other side of the world, you may be thinking, really, is America really in that bad shape? If America is turning to a negative position and is not going to be the great bastion of freedom we've remembered, what are we to do? My goodness, the rest of the world used to look to America for hope. Well, friends, maybe you were looking in the wrong place to begin with. You're not supposed to be looking to a country. You're not supposed to be worshiping a flag. You're supposed to be worshiping the Lord. Look to Him. You have the power and strength that you need to get through. Don't think that some government is going to solve your problems. Listen to what else Greg Laurie said to us. He urged all of us, no matter where we live or work or what our station in life might be, to reach out to others and to share faith. That's what people need right now. The faith that you and I have as believers in Jesus Christ. He said, quote, there may be neighbors or family friends or coworkers or friends that you've tried to have spiritual conversations with before that haven't gone all that well. Now, all of a sudden, they may be coming to you with problems they're facing, challenges, or a sense of despair, depression. We can point them to God. There is a God who cares about them. He noted that many young people who have been isolated from their friends and communities especially need our attention and care. He said, quote, people need personal interaction. They need communication and friends. They need others who care about them and someone to say to them, hey, you are loved. Your life matters. I care about you. So I think this is a great moment for believers in the church in general to step up and into that gap. We've been trying to do that in a small way, even in our own church. Here lately, it's just last night before I'm recording this, we took a group of young people to see a movie. And no, not one of the bad ones. It's going to make them any worse. We actually saw at a theater that provided it for us. Thank you, Miss Lisa. Provided us a showing of the Prince of Egypt. So it brought up our conversations about the life of Moses. And so, here we were just to get these kids out, give them a drink and some popcorn and some social interaction. We play ball with them. We feed them. We do whatever we can for the teenagers in our community so that they have an outlet and they'll understand there is some hope to their life that's coming up. It's a ministry that's needed in these days. It's, as we're getting ready to celebrate Easter and we're about to have a big sunrise service on Easter Sunday morning, serve breakfast and have 2 more services. We're hearing from some churches around that are even struggling to decide if they'll have a service at all on Easter. Well, I don't know if it's safe yet. I don't know if enough people have been vaccinated yet. I don't know this. I don't know that. Instead of being the hand of ministry reaching out to the people, we've decided to be the most frightened ones in the country and hide out. Pastors, I want to encourage you. Get up, stand up, speak up for the Lord. Be a source of hope for your people. Be the ones just like Pastor Laurie, who's trying to tell us to turn our panic into prayer and our worry into worship. I think that's the answer for all of us. Listen to what else he says. The good news is God has not forgotten us. He's always there for us. He says in Scripture, you're calling me and I will answer and do wonderful things for you. Well, sometimes when you're on your back, the only way that you can look up, the only way that you can look is up, right? I've often said sometimes God intentionally puts us on our back so that we will look up. It's something that He does out of his mercy and compassion for us when we think he's giving us problems. Oh God, I didn't need this right now. I didn't need to be in the hospital. I didn't need to have this problem, this setback. But yet God knew that you did need it so that you would start focusing on him. So listen to what he says. He says, look to the Lord and call upon him. He's there and he will help you and encourage you. Friends, that's where I believe we are as a church today. And at the same time, we face many challenges. And as a church, we're watching in the great apostasy some key leaders seem to be walking away from the church. We had a terrible announcement this week, or at least in some people's minds, terrible. I saw it coming. Of course, it's not something you necessarily talk to people in your church about. We watched a famous leader in Southern Baptist life named Beth Moore declare that she's walking away from Southern Baptist. Those of us who've been following her ministry have noted she walked away some time ago. She just hadn't made it official. She walked right into the camp of some of the woke mob and said, hey, here I am. What can I do for you? And so, friends, don't expect this to be the last one that walks away from the camp of the godly. It's just going to be a natural progression of things that are going to happen. I'll detail that a little more in my message on Sunday to my people with some things I don't necessarily want out on the internet. But friends, as you look around and you see what's happening in Christianity, you'll see the woke leftist mob talking about, oh, isn't it terrible how these Christians are falling apart? Look at some of their leaders who are finally getting it right, and they're coming over here with us, and we need to shake them up because, y'all are living in the past. You dinosaurs of ancient history. You need to get on board with the new plan, and you're going to hear that a lot. My friends, I want to encourage you to stick with the book, stick with the Bible. Keep scripture at the front of your devotional life each and every day, and stick with God's people and the ones that are standing on his word. Those things have not changed. We have a statement of faith in our denomination called the Baptist Faith and Message 2000. And many other denominations have statements of faith. Most any church that you have has probably a statement of its beliefs or faith in there. Have you been modifying that to match the circumstances of the times? Have you decided to go in and change your faith? I hope not, because you see, the Bible tells us we have a faith that is once delivered for all the saints. It's one Lord, one faith, one baptism, and that has not changed. God has not changed. He says, I'm the same yesterday, today, and forever. And in that particular case, we need to recognize when the world changes, it may not be for the better, it may be for the worst. And in these coming days, when you see the world collapsing around you into absurdity that you thought you would never hear in your own country, you rest fully in the Lord. You stay with his people. You focus on the truth and focus on Jesus, who's the way, the truth, and the life. That's the safe place to be in these dangerous times. God bless you. Thank you for joining me today on the Biblical Perspective. We'll do this again next Saturday, and tomorrow we'll be publishing our message from First Baptist Church, Winnsboro, South Carolina. Look for that online as well. And then Wake Up in the Word, Monday through Friday. If you like what we're doing, hit that on Rumble, that Rumble button or that like button, and share the message with friends so that we can keep encouraging one another until Jesus comes. God bless you.